That's very helpful indeed. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Simon Fell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. I think it's fair to say when we had our first session last week, this was an area where there was quite a steep learning curve for us, so it's really helpful to dig into some of these issues. And I'd like to follow up on some of James Daly's questions around data and prevalence. Perhaps if I start with you, Dr. Boyle, first. I'm interested in knowing what good reporting would look like. You talked about ISTVs and those feeding through to the community safety partnerships, but I'm interested to know what, in your mind, what good data could be collected either by yourselves in the NHS or by the police, and how that would shift things in terms of the response that people who've become victims of spiking might see.
Okay, so again, we'll be dealing with a lack of hard evidence of effect in this area because the perception on spiking is a relatively new thing. Good data sharing from with ISTV, which is an NHS England supported activity, also supported by the Royal College of Emergency. It shares anonymous aggregate data each month with the local community safety partnership and allow identification for the police and licensing authorities about problem hotspot areas. It's also known as the Cardiff model. Professor Jonathan Shepherd, who's a professor up in Cardiff University, developed this. It is adopted across, it's all emergency departments are supposed to do it. There's a lot of things we're all supposed to do that we don't do as well as we would like to. But where this is effective, and there are a number of places that do this very well, places like Arrow Park and the Wirralls, some of the London hospitals, my own hospital, we do it quite well. That's actually really powerful and allows the police to identify hotspots and take appropriate action.
Thank you. That's helpful. You mentioned earlier that just in terms of drug testing, so if a patient presents to you, it's looking after them, making sure they're safe is your primary concern, and quite rightly so. I'm wondering what shifts the way you treat a patient and whether they might be tested. So it's under what circumstances would you run those sorts of tests? And on a sort of wholesale basis, what would make that standard operating procedure for you?
So we would use these tests where we were trying to answer a clinical question where we think it would change management. So if a patient was brought to us and they were hallucinating, a test like this would be very useful for us to distinguish whether they were suffering from a consequence of drug overdose or this is a primary presentation of a serious mental illness like schizophrenia. Likewise, if we were trying to work, somebody was brought into us and they were unconscious and we were trying to piece together whether they had suffered a serious head injury, whether they were drunk or whether they'd been poisoned, then a test like that would be useful. But the vast majority of spiking cases don't fall into those categories.
Thank you. That's helpful. And I suppose last question in this bracket would be, if more hard data was available to you, what difference would that make to you in terms of how you treat people who present?
I don't think it would actually make very much difference to the way we would treat patients. I think we would continue to encourage people to go and make reports to the police. We would continue to encourage people to use existing services that don't require the full facilities of an emergency department. And we would continue to advocate that emergency departments need to work well as part of the local community safety partnership. And I don't think hard data would change what we do very much. The outcome data from people who present to emergency departments, as we put in our briefing paper, is most of them will be medically fine. They may be very distressed and go through a torrid time emotionally afterwards, but medically, most of them will be just fine.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Crittenden, just on that data point again, you mentioned in I think one of your last answers around how you're not currently sharing data. I'm just wondering what the barrier is to you doing that, or whether that's a policy decision from your end.
No barriers at present. I think the information that we are collecting at the moment is at a very small scale. We do intend to use this data collection, as something that we continuously do. We learn to improve in that. I would love to be able to share this information with other partners. I don't see a reason why not to? You know, we are all one team and all working together at some point throughout nighttime economy, so no barriers with that.
Thank you. And then just in terms of trying to understand prevalence, I'm keen to understand from your perspective whether spiking is a new thing or whether it's become something which is being increasingly reported in the media, so that's why we're talking about it more, but it's always been going on in the background. What's your view on that?
Data would suggest that we are seeing an increase in spiking, however we haven't had data to this level of detail before, so it's really hard to say if this has always been going on or is it because of the media interest that we have around it. What I will say is that we will continue to report this type of information, and I'm really happy to share information in the future with the committee so we can look back on future reference.
Thank you. And then I suppose question for both of you really, it's my last one, Chair, is whether you're seeing particular groups of people who are most susceptible or vulnerable to spiking in the work that you're doing.
Based on the very small set of data that we have, this data would insinuate that it's predominantly females between the ages of 18 to 25. But again, I don't think that information can be used to conclude any information or to spot themes or trends, as it's on such a small scale. And it is worth adding, in addition to this, nighttime economy is not in every town and every city, so we only go from the information that we have.
Fantastic, thank you. And then the same question to you, Dr. Ball.
Yes, so I think allegations of drink spiking, people have always attended emergency response. I think there is it's been a little bit driven by increased awareness of people coming to hospital, but it has always been a problem.
Thank you. And in terms of the groups who may present more, is there a particular
trend?
And
I would certainly say this is predominantly a problem of violence against women and girls. Not exclusively, but predominantly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.